Okay, so I'm going to start with the visualization exercise. We're going to go back in time. Back to a mythical time, hundreds upon hundreds of years ago, when people used to go places. Things like transportation infrastructure were relevant. People took trains en masse and moved around freely between countries. Back when statistics bureaus needed to measure commuter behavior in kilometers instead of strides. Then we had important questions, like where were all those people going who were so persistently stuck in the rush hour traffic jams? But travel is a thing we did and will hopefully do again, with a ton of far-reaching impact. Human mobility demanded studying, and the studying demanded data. I'm Danielle, and I'd like to talk to you about an app we made with the goal of getting this data from respondents more accurately and more easily. It's hard to put a thesis statement on one of these things, but here's my shot at it. Apps for measuring travel behavior, despite some issues, can provide wonderfully detailed and robust data that are going to be robust enough for official statistics. When we're looking for innovation and research methods, oftentimes we're doing so because we're acutely aware of some limitation of the current methodology. In survey research, we know that there's a laundry list of little problems that we've adapted to over the years, but we would frankly love to see them go away. We ask people to self-report things about themselves, which they're not always great at. We ask people to make estimations they may not be equipped to do, and we often ask people to think back and recall something they may or may not have done. Travel diary studies are one of those things that end up asking a lot of respondents, and they hit a number of checkboxes of things that tend to produce data that aren't perfect. When mobile devices started to become more prevalent and more capable with their sensors, it was basically a no-brainer for exploration. We'd get some big wins on the problem areas because the data could be more granular, and importantly, it could be collected passively. So, in 2018, we developed an app that would record respondents' location data over a 7-day period. We wanted to know if it was possible to collect data that were robust enough to be used for official statistics. So, this is the point in the presentation where I'm supposed to lead with the results, but it kind of always feels like too loaded a question to answer in a single slide. Here's what I'll say. We got lots of data. Response rates were okay. People generally liked the app. Here's what else we found. We had a lot of missing data, and that turns out to be the thing standing in the way of answering our research question. If we're meant to judge the robustness of these app-based travel diary studies on the basis of the raw data, we're going to find it sorely lacking. But I think it's a mistake to allow ourselves to be daunted by the fact that the raw data are more complex. So, with that said, let's take the next 7 minutes or so to justify that statement. Here's the app. When someone was moving, the app asked for location updates every second. Users could see the track this produced, click into it, and annotate the trip with the mode of transportation. When someone stopped moving for a while, a stop was recorded, and the app dropped into a lower mode, where the location requests were made once per minute in order to save on battery life. Users were asked to click into these stops and annotate them, kind of like they did the tracks, but in this case with a name and the reason for the stop. Response rates were okay. 1,902 people were sent invitations to participate, and 674 eventually downloaded and logged into the app. Half of our sample were respondents who had participated in an online travel diary study in the 2 months prior. That's the Odin study. The other half were drawn just from the Dutch population register. As you might expect, people who'd participated in the other travel study were also more likely to participate into this one. 44% of the participants in the previous study registered a device, whereas only 27% of the new sample registered their device. Our sample was also stratified by incentive condition. We sent everyone an unconditional €5 gift card for participating, but then we split our sample into 3 groups. Group 1 got €5 for downloading the app, and we promised them another €5 if they recorded 7 days' worth of data. Group 2 received nothing for downloading the app, but they got €10 for recording 7 days of data. And Group 3 received nothing for downloading the app, but they got €20 conditional on 7 days' worth of travel data. Probably unsurprisingly, The highest response rate was found in the highest incentive condition, but the response rate between the two 10-euro conditions was significantly different. We were able to use the Dutch population register in order to get some info on who participated and who didn't. We found that older people were a little less likely to register a device, Dutch-born people were more likely to respond, and second-generation immigrants were more likely to respond than first-generation immigrants. Higher levels of education were overrepresented in respondents, and one-person households underrepresented. We got more homeowners, fewer renters, and we found a small impact of income, with higher incomes being more likely to respond. So because half of our sample came from a group that had participated in a different travel diary study, we had kind of a unique opportunity here to look at the same people. When they participated in Odin, they provided information on only one day, and when they participated in our study, they provided often more days. We record almost as much travel on weekends as we record on weekdays, but when people reported their own behaviors, they tended to report much less travel on weekends. Because we're working with so few people, it's hard to make any real inferences about which here should be taken as the ground truth. On the other hand, this does tend to confirm researchers' suspicions that people tend to underreport their weekend travel because they're leaving out the small trips, as opposed to their weekday travel, which is more recognizable because it tends to follow a pattern. So, that one showed the full group and the distributions against each other. But this shows each individual participant. So if somebody provided their travel diary for a weekday, so let's say a Friday in Odin, what we've done here is we've matched it up with weekday travel behavior that came out of the app. The lines here behind the data represent the spread between the max distance and the min distance that we recorded on other weekdays. So you can see that if we look at it this way and we kind of pin up the weekday numbers against what they reported, that in general tend to fall along the line between the max and the min. Here we can look at something similar, but instead of looking at distance, we'll look at the number of trips. Again, we see a pretty big difference between Odin and Tabi in terms of how these trips go. Again, we can break this down at an individual level, where we can kind of look at one person. How did that look stacked against their total number of trips for all of their other days? We see that, generally speaking, the number of trips reported tend to fall within the max and the min of the trips that were recorded with the app. In the app, our users reported 4.2 trips per day, going on average 45.7 kilometers, and taking up 60 minutes on average. In the Odin data, where we have different people, but we restricted it to the same time period, users reported making 3.2 trips, still getting around the same distance, 45.4 kilometers, and on average their trips lasted 30 minutes. So, while we wait for travel to start up again in a way that looks more like the past, so we can try this again and hope our results continue to stack up, I'm content for the moment to hole up behind my computer and solve the messy bits that didn't make it into this presentation. All the data I presented to you were based on the smaller set of complete data, where we have 584 full days from 187 different users, with no gaps and no holes. But the thing is, we have partial data on almost 6,000 additional user days. It's a lot, and I'm not sure anyone expected that we'd have quite that much to contend with. But the fact that the full data look good means that there's hope here, because we know what we're shooting for. Here's the bottom line. At this point, it really does look like apps are going to produce more accurate representation of travel behavior. There's room for cautious celebration. We see differences in the number of reported trips between app-recorded behavior and diary-recorded behavior, and in time spent traveling. When we stack up individual users' reports against their recorded behavior, the results are plausible, but show us interperson variability can be quite high even on work days. Lastly, the data are capable of allowing us to answer research questions that we couldn't before. We might even find out who's in all those rush hour traffic jams. Thanks for spending these last 10 minutes with me. If you want to chat, hit me up at this email address. And many, many thanks to all the people that have contributed to this project. They have email addresses too. So goodbye. good luck, and I'll see you in the rest of the conference.